This podcast is brought to you by FlexiSpot and their C7 office chair. Use offer code C750 for $50 off the non-light versions of this office chair. And then remember that FlexiSpot provides all kind of ergonomic products for your home office. And then it is also brought to you by cdkeyoffer.com. Use offer code BrokenSilicon to save 25% on all Microsoft software. And we'll talk about these sponsors more later. But for now, let's just get on with the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and today I am joined by my co-host,
Dan.
How you doing, Dan?
Pretty good, I suppose. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. We're recording a few hours, really 2 hours earlier than usual because we're seeing, what band was it? Young Mister in Nashville. We just saw this indie band I've had a song from for a while showing up here in East Nashville, and I was like, let's just record a couple hours early and, see what they're all about, Dan.
I don't know. I don't really know much music from them, but I hope you have a good time.
But you have driven with me before, and I'm sure you've heard the song I sent you.
Oh, yes, I have.
Anybody out there? But I don't know. Anything interesting going on with you today, Dan? I saw you were assembling a FlexiSpot chair, and we tried to make your dogs, or the dogs you're living with, one dog you own, another dog our parents have, and trying to get them to be on the chair while you demonstrate the recliner functions, and they were just not having it.
Yeah, so I should have known. I mean, I Tom is aware of this, but my dog is very wary of non-living objects that like move. Like,
that's right. That's what it is.
Like if
an automaton.
Yes, she's very much a Luddite. So like one time I sent Tom a video of her scared of like a rooster weather vane thing that
like just a little rooster with like its wings were propellers, and she was freaking out that something could be moving that wasn't an animal.
Yeah, so she didn't like it, and then the other dog, my parents' dog, just did not want to get on the chair. So
so failed to even get on the chair.
The best I got was my dog Wendy sitting on the chair for a couple seconds, wagging her tail, and then immediately jumping off.
Yeah,
but I don't know. Successful chair assembly, I guess, and somewhat successful getting cute dog footage.
Yeah, I think at a minimum you were entertained.
Yes.
I'm trying to think, are there any other examples? Because I do know whether it could be I should fly a drone next to Wendy and see what she does.
I think it's best not to. We don't need to scare the puppy.
But even like my girlfriend's cat, when he walks by her, she goes and freezes. Like just completely like a statue freezes, Maurice just walks by her and she's just like, it's right there. It's in the house.
She wants to make sure the cat isn't going to kill her. So she just like stares at it. But then when Maurice looks at her, she's like, nope, we're not.
No aggressiveness shown whatsoever.
No, she's generally pretty good with cats. She just kind of wants to be ignored by them, though.
Well, speaking of things that we won't ignore, it's things that we get wrong. So let's start off as we usually do with corrections. QH Freddy writes in and says, you guys have recently been talking about how actually you can use mouse and keyboard on more console games than people realize these days. But it should be noted that there's quite a few multiplayer games that will ban you for using mouse and keyboard on console. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really know that. It doesn't, I guess, surprise me. Although it seems odd because I know on PC, either they don't care because they think it's balanced enough. Like I think Battlefield, they're like, use whatever you want. Obviously, half of the people have a controller and a keyboard and mouse they're using because they have to fly vehicles. And the aim assist is there, but it's light enough that we don't think it's unfair. But I do know, I think Call of Duty is one of those games where they're like crazy. They're like, hey, you plugged in a controller, you're getting banned if you don't restart this and only use controller. I think it's odd they can't at least offer that on console. It should be again, me and you keep talking about this, like mouse and keyboard should be supported on console and PC across the board. Xbox, PlayStation controllers, keyboard and mouse, maybe even Nintendo input, because why not? And it is
Yeah.
still odd there's these differences on devices.
Yeah, I read a little bit about it. Like, I guess Overwatch is one of the games that does this. And it's because you still get the aim assist that console provides you with the keyboard and mouse, where you would think they would just be able to auto toggle turn.
But Overwatch is online only, right?
Yeah.
So I'm confused. Why do they even support keyboard and mouse on console?
Well, it's well, there was a question about it because it's crossplay, so there are already people with keyboard and mouse and controllers playing together. But I guess you still get aim assist if you're using it on the keyboard and mouse on the controller, so they ban you. I mean, I think there would be a better solution.
So he's talking about those keyboard and mouses that translate it, not ones that's natively added. Because why? Because if it's an online only game and you can use a natural keyboard and mouse, why would they allow that if you're just going to get, but you're saying it's one of those keyboards and mouses that translates controller to keyboard or mouse.
I guess, yeah. I think it should be allowed, and yeah, I get why controller gets aim assist and keyboard and mouse doesn't, but I don't know. I feel like there's a better way.
Or again, then the game should just naturally support it, detect what you're using, and but then know if you're using one, it's like, hey, whoa, what the heck now? That's not fair. Yeah, I don't know. It's still odd to me. Melodic Warrior writes said in Die Shrink 127, when we got to the topic of Nintendo in the PC space, so this is when Melodic Warrior was actually on the Die Shrink.
Wow.
He said, when we got to the topic of Nintendo in the PC space, I completely forgot to mention that there were emails that emerged of Nintendo pivoting to the PC space. In exchanges between Phil Spencer and Sarah Hood, apparently Nintendo had made it clear in other conversations that they will enter PC gaming in the next 5 years. 2020 is when the emails occurred.
Well, I hope that's still the plan.
Yeah, I mean, it's long overdue for Nintendo to allow any way to play their games that isn't on an overpriced console that uses smartphone tech from 5 years ago. And this would further play into why Nintendo is going so draconian on emulators right now. I mean, we've covered pretty extensively on the channel, like this idea that, maybe they're going after emulators right now because it seems almost completely guaranteed that the Switch 2 those games will also work on emulators pre-designed for the Switch 1 because of how well Switch 1 games already run on it, able to go to way higher frame rates. There's probably extra gas in the tank, and because of backwards compatibility, you can probably already run them at higher frame rates than whatever the Ampere-based Switch 2 will be able to do it. So they don't want emulators on day one making it so no one buys a Switch 2. Instead of us, an ROG Ally and just using an emulator. But then if they're also bringing it to PC, they're probably like, also, this is another reason we do not want any other way to play it on PC.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I guess from a business standpoint, I really just hope this is still the case because then I might actually get some Nintendo games I've potentially wanted to play.
All right. Well, with that out of the way, I believe we should move on to story number 1. Intel unveils Arrow Lake. Quoting first from Tech Power Up and then moving on to some editorialization. Recently, Intel announced the Core Ultra 2 series Arrow Lake S desktop processor family. This marks the first true next generation of desktop processors for the company since its 13th gen Core Raptor Lake, or some might argue 12th gen Core Alder Lake. With Arrow Lake, Intel aims to bring many of the technological innovations debuted with Meteor Lake to desktop, along with a new desktop platform and a new socket, LGA 1851. Yes, that does mean you'll need a new motherboard to get Arrow Lake. But it's not just a new expensive platform raising concerns about this product family. Additionally, the gaming performance gains disclosed by Intel appear modest. They're practically on par with the 14900K. For those who've forgotten, AMD has beaten the 14900K with a 7800 X3D in gaming already and is working to release the 9800 X3D shortly. Additionally, as highlighted in the last loose ends on Moore's Law is Dead, there are numerous red flags in Intel's notes that suggest AMD and Raptor Lake had their memory gimped in Intel's canned testing, and most of the time, Arrow Lake was running at a higher power consumption limit than the AMD counterparts. And finally, Intel also continues to offer baffling slides to market their Skymon E-cores. When they unveiled Lunar Lake, they showed that Microsoft Teams could run entirely on the E-cores, while the 4 big cores were allowed to do whatever. But that begged the question, well, wait a second. So if I have anything running in the background, I only have 4 threads to run a game? That's questionable. But then with the Arrow Lake slides, they also talked about when Teams was getting into heavy usage, having a powerful thread director that will move teams from the E cores to 4 of the P cores, making you wonder, well, wait a second, are the E cores only used when they have to be? Is SkyMont actually as strong as we think it is? Really 4 Raptor Lake cores can't run teams all the time? Anyways, all of this must make us beg the question, why is Intel goosing the numbers so heavily this time around? Really, the answer is obvious. Investors don't seem happy with Intel stock right now, and thus the company needs to gain the confidence of these investors. And the success of Arrow Lake will play a big role, or the not success, in changing or not changing investor perceptions. However, it's hard to see Arrow Lake as an obvious win right now, despite it being one they desperately need. But at least the on-paper pricing, we can say, is positioning Arrow Lake under the AMD on-paper pricing. If Intel can launch Arrow Lake and keep street pricing 10 to 20% below their AMD counterparts, perhaps they can successfully defend their existing market share. And they will need to keep it 10 to 20% cheaper, in this person's, me's opinion, by the way, because considering you need to get a new expensive LG 1851 platform, you need to at least have some reason to entice people to buy this over Zen 5 on the existing AM5 platforms. Anyways, so, yep, there you go. It's finally all unveiled. I feel like we've basically known what's going on with Arrow Lake for a while. We talked about it briefly on a recent die shrink that just came out. You get access to if you support us on Patreon. But still, I mean, seeing them announce 9% IPC, seeing them have to goose numbers to win in single threading, or not single, I think it was single threading against Zen 5 by 4% while using faster RAM and a higher power consumption, making me wonder if we use the same level of power, like up to 250 watts with a 9950X with a multi-threading performance, just trade blows with Arrow Lake anyways. I don't know. I will just go first, I guess, actually, and say I'm very disappointed in what I'm seeing here. I mean, what do you think of Arrow Lake, Dan?
I mean, I guess the most positive thing I have to say about it is, and I'm curious to see how this translates to on review day, is they are really pumping up it up as a content creator CPU. So multi-core, it seems like it's made some pretty big gains from at least what they showed, and if those are honest gains against like the 9950X, it could be the best for content creation, obviously with the caveats that this is probably a more limited platform than what AM5 will be overall, because I mean, who knows, this might be the one generation on this platform with that big caveat. But like, gaming performance is obviously pretty disappointing, and at least I mean, it really is just another advertisement for the 7800 X3D when it comes to gaming. I mean, just get the 7800 X3D or wait for the 9800 X3D, which I'm assuming they're going to unveil right around the launch of Arrow Lake, with a launch in early November. I think that's the rumor. I haven't
been told nor asked anyone about this really, but yeah, I think the rumor is that they're going to like unveil it like the day before or after Arrow Lake reviews, which at first I think, why not do it before? But if they think Arrow Lake's going to get bad reviews, why not actually do it the day after, now that I think about it? Like, let them get a negative press cycle and then show it off.
Yeah, that's probably the smarter way to go about it. I mean, either I think works out, but yeah, I say wait a day, especially when they're going to put out very disappointing gaming numbers. Like what they showed here, I mean, I'm guessing the overall impression that reviewers are going to have is worse than what they showed for gaming, and this is essentially a wash for gaming. Like, if they had done a head-to-head comparison of the 7800 X3D, which obviously they're not going to, because that's going to...
I don't think that's obvious. You know, I think it's so silly. I think obviously you should show that. Like, just say, yeah, they're 5% better, which they later did say that. Router later did say that, but we think our product's overall better. But they can't even do that. And I believe they even had a slide where they're like balanced against the 7950X 3D. And they like did that to show they're better at multi-threading and tie and gaming. It's like, yeah, but that's the 7950X 3D, not the 7800X 3D for gaming, nor the 7950X or 9950X in multi-threading. It's just such cherry picking.
I mean, the one thing I'll say is, like, both I think Zen 5 and Arrow Lake have been somewhat disappointing up until this point. And the needle hasn't really been moved on a lot of things. I think the 9800 X3D is at least going to change that for the gaming crown and productivity tasks. I don't know. Zen 5, it beats the 4900K, but if Arrow Lake ends up being as good for productivity as they claim it is, I guess the big thing they would have is you can get a $600, a cheaper than the 9950X, and better multi-threading. So they might have that going for them. But I do think there's just a lot of caveats with Intel right now where, like, I do think they're mostly just catching up. And I do think at least Arrow Lake has, from what they've claimed, kind of caught up, even if they're going to quickly be killed by the 9800X3D.
I mean, am I wrong though? Doesn't it just kind of feel like we are getting some like heavy Meteor Lake vibes again? Like what they're showing off is supposed to be revolutionary, is supposed to be the thing that leapfrogs AMD. And it kind of just seems like the same thing that panned out with like Meteor Lake versus Hawkpoint, where it's like, you're really not more efficient Intel. The numbers you showed were cherry picking. You're single threading. There's a single threading win of like 2%, but you're even losing to your previous generation slightly in some uses.
Yeah.
It just kind of feels like Meteor Lake all over again to me.
Yeah, to me, it feels like they did the bare minimum of keeping a promise where at least they got the power usage seemingly in check now. That's not worthy of a huge amount of praise, but I don't know. It looks like this could then at least be a reset for them going forward, and maybe next generation will be genuinely impressive, or could be genuinely impressive, where this is just, you guys caught up on efficiency with AMD finally. Your gaming performance is pretty lackluster. And according to you, your content creation is in some cases, or like with their, I believe they're claiming pretty big wins in encoding and rendering. So if that really does hold true, at least they have a big win to claim there. But overall, yeah, I do think this is mostly just them catching up to AMD, and right as they catch up, AMD is going to put out something that kills them in gaming again.
And again, I don't know, just anytime they win a lot, I'm like, this looks like a weird cherry picked scenario.
It was a slight win over the 9950X, right?
Yeah, it was like 8 to 15%. But if you look at the notes, they had a PL1 and PL2 of 250 watts here.
Oh.
And it's like, okay, but we've seen AMD gain 7 to 15%. I think Arrow Lake will keep a multi-threading crown, but it might be a multi-threading crown they win by like 2 to 5%, which doesn't change what we saw with Raptor Lake win. It's better. It's not like 400 watts versus 170 watts and a 5% and like a 10%, a 5 to 10% win. It's like, again, maybe a 5% win, but now you're using 20 to 30% more power. Or if you really push the 9950X, maybe only slightly. But again, you have to use TSMC 3 nanometer to get there.
Yeah, and I do think like Hardware Unbox coverage of it was pretty good, where they pointed out that like Intel is really being wishy-washy in how they're showing their performance and efficiency numbers, where they're not making the same claim they're not making those claims at the same power usage, and they're not making it clear that that's what they're doing. And I mean, I get it. It's an attempt to make it look better than it is. That's what marketing does. But they were very obfuscating in their
very
unveil.
Obviously.
Yeah, very obviously obfuscating the numbers in their unveiling. And I really think reviews are going to add a lot of clarity to whatever weird showing that was. Because, I mean, it could be like they're trying to point out these huge claims of productivity wins and multi-threading wins against AMD, and then it could be on review day it comes out, well, yeah, that was because it was using twice as much energy, or like 50% more energy than whatever AMD was using. And that's why we need reviews. Like, they might take a very, very slight multi-threading win, gaming loss, and that's the end of the story. Like, which I guess in some instances might still be good, because at least they're pricing their CPUs, I would say, somewhat aggressively against AMD.
Yeah, but I guess we'll see, because this often happens. This happened with, I believe, Raptor Lake, where I leaked pricing when I was like, it seems like this is going to cost more. And then they announced the same price, $589, and you go to Newegg and it launched at $649. And I'm like, so this was actually the price per 1,000 units shipped. This is not the real MSRP. So we're just gonna have to see because right now I believe, I mean, I guess I should double check. It actually has fluctuated because I think now the 9950X is starting to pick up in sales a little bit. It's $599. It's $599 on Newegg. It's the same price. And at Newegg they have the i9 for $649, like they did, I believe, with the Raptor Lake, and I think Alder Lake ones, despite announcing an MSRP, which is really 1,000 CPUs per tray. Then it's the same price, and I don't see anyone going, even if it wins by 5%, which it doesn't really seem like it will. Yeah, I'm going to pay the same price for something that uses more energy, and I now need to buy a $500 motherboard.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, I guess that also depends on. I wasn't sure on motherboard pricing. If the
I've heard expensive.
So if the overall package is like $200 or $300 more than what you would get with a 9950X, yeah, a lot of people still might go for the 9950X. And yeah, you did rightly point out that Intel doesn't really have MSRPs for their CPUs. That's what they sell up per CPU, and it always ends up being like $30 to $50 more than what people call the MSRP initially.
Yeah, suggested e-tail price. Yeah, e-tail. It's wishy-washy even in how they say the pricing is going to be. All right. Neen writes in and says, although it's early with Arrow Lake and upcoming Battlemage, do you think these developments could help Intel regain market or mindshare in budget builds? No. Content creation, maybe. In similar areas compared to AMD, if they perform well in power and performance, or do you think those areas are afterthoughts for both teams? Well, so it's funny. I've heard a lot of people say, well, shouldn't we applaud Intel for going for efficiency this time? And I'd go, well, number one, I do think it's a better choice to not be selling CPUs with 125-watt TDPs that use 400 watts. Sure, but I don't think they're doing this because they're like, this is the right thing to do. I think they're doing this because Arrow Lake either doesn't clock as high or they're worried they're going to fry the ring bus like they fried the ring bus of Raptor Lake. I've been told the ring bus clocks are much lower this time around. I think that's because they know it has to be, or they will break it like they broke Raptor Lake. That's my suspicion. Or they're at least worried that could be true.
I mean, yeah, efficiency obviously needs to improve, especially after the scandal this year. Like, this isn't... this is Intel reining in whatever they were doing with Raptor Lake. Like, if it were as poor efficiency as Raptor Lake refresh was, or even just Raptor Lake, it would have been an unmitigated disaster this time around.
Yeah. And I think on that note, too, I think still people are going to be really suspect on if they should trust Arrow Lake for a few months. So,
yeah,
will Arrow Lake help? I mean, look, it's better than nothing. I mean, but that's actually quite an understatement because we're not in a world now where it's like Alder Lake loses to Zen 4 by 20% in multi-threading and 5% in single threading or something. We're in a world where people don't buy Raptor Lake. So, yes, it can only make things better, but literally launching any lineup that is unlikely to have the same problems would have done better. And it doesn't really seem to raise performance. So, I don't know. I don't think this is going to do much. I think this might stem the bleeding in laptop a little, but
yeah.
But we'll have to see how it really does there in efficiency compared to Lunar Lake. And on desktop, stem the bleeding is the best that I expect. I don't see this being every gamer or content creator goes, I'm buying Intel finally, and it's the obvious choice. I think it will stem the bleeding, but AMD's just got momentum here. That can't be ignored.
Yeah. Like the demographic that he brought up that I think this could have the most sway the most would be content creation, and that's not that big of a demographic. I mean, that's a subgroup of DIYers. So,
and ones that want to spend that much on it and aren't served as well by just getting Zen 5 now or something.
Yeah, I just mean I don't think that's going to meaningfully move the needle in any way.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of moving the needle, let us move on now to story number 2. AMD Ryzen 7 9800X30 specs and release date confirmed. Recently, we saw several more leaks of AMD's Ryzen 9000 X3D lineup, including a Cinebench leak that showed significant performance increases over non-X3D SKUs and very high all-core boost clocks, holding 5.2 gigahertz on all-core in Cinebench, a workload that hammers all-cores heavily. Then, this channel, Moore's Law is Dead, leaked that the 9800 X3D would launch in November, have full PBO and overclocking support, and an aggressive 120-watt TDP, further supporting the rumors that it could boost to 5.2 gigahertz on all core. And a Max Sun leak that came out this weekend also backed up exclusive Moore's Law details as well. And then finally, Gigabyte included an X3D turbo mode in a press release, implicitly confirming that the third gen Vcache will allow some form of overclocking. Combining all of these improvements together, Ryzen 9000 X3D should comfortably retain the gaming crown for AMD, while also being able to offer their X3D chips without really any weaknesses compared to their non-X3D brethren this time around. So what do you think of all this stuff, Dan?
I mean, it's exciting, especially with that overclocking support. I'm curious how high people will be able to get the clock speeds for this up to on average,
and that's a big unknown that still makes us not quite sure how big this is going to be.
Yeah, because like if in the event that you could get it to like just 5.5 gigahertz, I mean, that would be huge. and
we've seen the 9950X hit 6 gigahertz on non-exotic cooling in some systems. So I would believe if it could hit 5.7 gigahertz, but I could also believe if it taps out at 5.3. I just don't know.
Yeah, and 5.5 is just, well, that's what the non-X3D boosts to normally. So if you could boost it to that, I mean, you're really making no sacrifices for having Vcache. So I imagine whatever performance you got out of the 7800 X3D versus the Vcache versions, I mean, that might just apply doubly so with the Zen 5 X3D.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I saw some people in the Moore's Law Discord, which you get access to if you support us on Patreon, discussing like how crazy the higher boost clocks and all-core base clocks are. Like that, it's like I think it's 4.7 gigahertz is the base clock of the 9800 X3D, and if I go to the 9700X and look at its base clocks, I believe it's quite a bit 3.8 gigahertz, and it still typically boosts a little. Actually, only boosts around there. If you have it at 65 watts, if you have it at 105 watts, it obviously goes to like 4 point something gigahertz. And so yeah, we're seeing all core boost clocks here that are 10-20% faster than the 9700X. But I don't think that's that surprising because, again, they're going to a 120-watt TDP, and I think these will be better yields to make do with a voltage cap that still clearly seems to be in place there. Why else would the base clock be 10-20% faster than the 9700X, but the boost clock be lower? I think it's because they have better samples, but there's still some voltage restraints here on X3D, but AMD is figuring, well, yeah, but at those lower voltages, we could still boost all of the cores higher than 5 gigahertz now, right? And because of that, I think it's obvious what they want is the 9800 X3D to be seen as completely better than the 9700 X3D. Unlike before, where it's like, well, if you like productivity, actually the 7700X is 5-10% faster. They want this to be like, oh no, it's like actually firmly in between the 9700 and 9900X in multi-threading, because of the higher TDP and the better all-core boost clocks. And then it's also, 10-20% faster than the 9700X in gaming as well. This is a premium product, a full tier above what's below it.
Oh, yeah. Like if it can maintain those clock speeds, the 9800 X3D is easily going to be the CPU of the generation for both Arrow Lake and Zen 5. Like
between them, yeah.
Yeah, that's just what almost I think everybody should be getting. Until the, I don't know, depending on what price it releases at, like a 9600 X3D maybe.
Right.
And yeah, that's what they would call it probably.
And then, of course, the other big unknown here. So I've already touched on one, but yeah, it's just how high can this really clock to, because if they hit 5.7, guys, I mean, look, the 9800 X3D is already beating Arrow Lake in gaming by 5%. If you can overclock this to 5.7, this is going to win gaming by probably 20%.
Oh yeah, I could easily see
But
it.
I don't know if it will. I still think it will by at least 10%. And then, and I don't know what else to say here because I haven't really looked into this much, but also this X3D turbo mode. That's another thing that makes me go, what does that mean? Does that mean this can boost far higher, but there's some reason you don't want to do that at stock? It even talks about how the 7000 series ones, I believe, get a huge boost from this. So that's a huge unknown to me of exactly what's going on here with this X3D turbo mode and why it didn't exist before and why it can't just be stock settings.
Although I don't know, that's motherboard manufacturers. They're always trying to push the boundaries to get big performance wins. So the only other unknown is hopefully this isn't some stupid, irresponsible setting that has happened in the past with motherboard manufacturers.
That like breaks chips or something.
Yeah.
I doubt it. I mean, I think both AMD and Intel are really sensitive to that sort of thing right now. But
they should be.
Yeah, but I don't know. That's the unknown, you know. I guess for both of them, that I guess I kind of got that jumbled up. But like, what are the two unknowns? And it's like, can we overclock this to 5.7 gigahertz? And then also, what does the turbo mode do? Like, is this something that just goes to 5.5 all core and starts getting to a point where in mixed threaded workloads, it's beating the 9900X? I don't know, but I hope they really push this to be what it needs to be. And I hope the 9950X 3D, hopefully it gets 2 Vcache CCDs, or at a minimum, there's no Xbox game bar worries at all. It always schedules correctly. And it's just this monster that, I mean, like, what if it has like a 6 gigahertz non-X3D tile? And like, because they really need both of these to be the best they can be right now, to take back momentum from Intel and to hopefully make us forget how stupid the Zen 5 launch was. I mean, truly a horrible launch.
Oh, yeah.
This piece of content is brought to you by FlexiSpot and the roster of high-quality adjustable C7 office chairs. Recently, Dan, co-host of Broken Silicon, upgraded to a mesh C7 with an included footrest because his old office chair from college wasn't exactly looking so hot anymore. And I gotta say, he loves it. It's better than any chair he's used recently. It's quieter and more comfortable. And that's because the FlexiSpot C7 has dynamic lumbar support, forward seat tilt, and generous recline angles for staying comfy over hours in multiple positions, including, if you get the retractable footrest, kicking back and putting your feet up so this thing can truly be for both work and leisure. And of course, just like all FlexiSpot products, it comes with an outstanding warranty. Genuinely, Dan loves it because of how easy it is to adjust the sitting depth and back support to perfectly accommodate the posture he likes to sit in. And you've probably noticed that we use a lot of FlexiSpot products around here at Moore's Law is Dead, like the standing desk I'm actually using right now while I record this ad. And that's because they genuinely make fantastic, reliable products. And so if you want to support Moore's Law is Dead and maybe get one of these fantastic products as well, click on the link in the description and follow the directions below to get the best prices on their products. If you do, you'll both be supporting the channel and also getting yourself the best possible deal on these products. So check out FlexiSpot office chairs today. QH Freddy writes in, he says, does the AMD Ryzen 7 X3D parts even need to compete with the i7 in gaming performance? A lot of the time, it feels like the more relevant comparison is the i5. Let me pull up the pricing here for Arrow Lake. Yeah, I mean, I think it needs to. I mean, usually the X3D 8-core is priced close to where the i7 is. So yes, I think it needs to.
I mean, yeah. How much is a 9800 X3D? Will probably be what, $400, I would think.
If AMD's smart, I think it should be $399, and I think $449 is the expectation.
And let me make sure the Ultra 7s now. Yeah, the Ultra 7 is $400. I'm just $390.
It's going to be $390 to $430. You know, so yeah. I think $399 is where they should go, and hopefully, with how hard they're pushing all-core boost, like this thing, it will lose in multi-threading. You know, against what is it, a 20-core? Yeah, 20-core i7. But you know, you got 16 threads. If they pushed really hard, it might be one of these things where it's like, this wins in gaming by 20%. If it loses in multi-threading by 20, do you really care? Are all of your multi-threading apps Blender? Not running on a GPU, you know. I suspect that's also why they're pushing the all-core so hard.
But yeah, I don't know. I think there's a strong case to be made for, well, your market competitor is who you're, or for an SKU is whatever is closest in price to it. And I guess we'll see how it shakes out. Maybe the Ultra 5 could end up being the closer in price to the X3D than we think. But at these pricings, the Ultra 7 stuff look like it's going to be with a competitor that of the 9800 X3D.
Yeah. And when it comes to i5, I just think the i5s compete with last gen or the budget versions. Like right now, 5700X is like $200. I'm sorry, 5700 X3D is like $200 and competes with Raptor Lake fine in gaming, well, using a fraction of the energy and again costing half as much as its competitors. Well, not half as much if it's an i5, but a lot less. And I think we can compare it to the i5 eventually when they launch a 9600 X3D, but they haven't yet. And yeah, I think they should also launch a 9600 X3D with at least 5.1, 5.2 gigahertz, all core going crazy here. Because again, this time, I think it's a very big deal that the i5 doesn't have hyperthreading. It's a much bigger deal, I suspect, than the Ultra 9 because now you're only getting 14 threads total.
Oh yeah,
and, you can see how this like goes on down the stack. Like, I guess in the i7, it's probably the most competitive because you have 20 threads versus. Well, I mean, I don't know. The 9900X is basically the same price as what this i7 will be as well because it's dropped in price because no one wants it at $500. But so you got like 24 threads with the 9900X and 16 threads with the 9800 X3D versus 20 threads with the i7. I'd say the i7 is competitive in threads there. But you look at the i9, 24 versus 32, but they're stronger. So it's, that's why it's timed multi-threading. When you get down to the i5, it's 14 threads versus 16 threads in the 9700X or 12 threads in the 9600 X3D. I think that's when we get the 9600 X3D, that's where there will be big questions on if AMD pushes that as hard as they're pushing the 9800 X3D. If there's really any point in this i5 at all, because the 9600 X3D is going to crush it in gaming by probably 20%. I mean, look, the Ultra 5 is 5.2 gigahertz boost clocks. It's going to be probably about the same as the 9600 X3D. And then it has 14 threads versus 12 threads. I mean, if AMD gets all 12 threads running at 5.2 on a 9600 X3D, it's probably not going to be that much worse at multi-threading because they don't have hyper-threading anymore.
Yeah, they don't have hyper-threading, and with the i5s, the majority of the cores are the E-cores this time. Well, I think that was the case last time, but we don't have hyper-threading. So the majority of the threads now are the E-cores too.
Yeah. Or I guess to put it another way, with the Ultra 9 this gen versus last gen, they're going from 32 threads to 24. With the i7, what are they going from 28 to 20? We're talking about 33, 40% reductions. With the i5s, they're going from 20 threads to 14.
Yeah.
It's the biggest drop in thread count, and that is the most calling into question if actually down there with the 9700X boosting higher, will it actually be closer than it has been for a lot of recent generations. Alu Viti writes in and says, did Intel not read their own snake oil marketing materials when they decided to sell Alder Lake parts as Intel Core 200? Yeah, I mean, this is something I don't think we need to spend too much time on, but they will also have Core 200. So what does that mean? Core 9, not Ultra 9, Core 7, not Ultra 7, 200, that are not just rebranded Raptor Lake, but also rebranded Alder Lake. And all I have to say to you, Alu Vite, is that snake oil marketing, it was just crap. That was always bullshit. It was always Intel who was hypocritical in how they name things just as often, if not more, than AMD. And why are they doing this? Oversupply. I cannot stop mentioning the oversupply of Alder Lake and Raptor Lake that Intel is still working through.
Yeah, and at least, AMD still gave you that fun little wheel to tell you, tool to tell you what their CPUs were based on their name.
Mm-hmm. All right, move on to another reader mail. Thalo215 writes in and says, hi, Tom and Dan. With Strix Point and Lunar Lake now out, how long do you think it will be before these chips pop up on a next-gen version of the BD790i ITX motherboard Minis Forum has? With the lackluster debut of Zen 5 and now Arrow Lake, these types of solutions have started to draw my interest. He's talking about, I mean, you might get one, Dan, like these ITX motherboards Minis Forum keeps launching that have technically mobile Zen 4, but it's like 5.4 gigahertz, 200 watt max, but like TDP setting, 16 cores. I mean, this is a 7950X with 5% lower clocks. and a motherboard that's like sometimes $400 to $500. So you're getting like a $500 CPU with a $200 motherboard with a cooler built on. So when will they have it with Zen 5? I mean, I can say that I haven't been flagged about this yet. I know they're just launching now a cheaper version of their motherboards. So of this type of Zen 4 motherboard. So I would suspect they won't have this. I mean, Fire Range isn't even out yet, right? So I don't think they'll have this until first half of next year, probably.
Yeah, the one thought I had is maybe, I mean, it looks like the current ones they have are kind of on clearance right now, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're preparing to, move on to the next generation, but that could still be months out, I suppose.
Yeah. But yeah, so I don't know. I would expect it to just be probably whenever AMD launches Fire Range officially, and that's supposed to be early next year. All right, moving on to story number 3. AMD officially releases AMD Turin and utterly crushes Granite Rapids in doing so. Quoting first from Phoronix and then moving on to editorialization. The tested AMD EPYC 9005 series processors delivered excellent generational performance gains over the EPYC 9004 series, leading performance over the new EPYC 6900P Granite Rapids series, and completing the trifecta in leading the competition in performance per dollar as well. I've always been really happy with the EPYC 9004 Genoa and Bergamo processors, but now AMD has really delivered exceptional performance and efficiency gains with the new series with Turin. Intel had an exciting run of a few weeks with Granite Rapids having the flagship performance, but now EPYC Turin is ready for some very competitive and oftentimes dominating action. Now, going over the info, Turin scales up the big core variants to 128 cores from Genoa's 96, while Turin Dense, using 3nm CCDs, went up to 192 cores from Bergamo's 128. Meanwhile, Granite Rapids offers up to 128 cores, managing to close the core count chasm that existed with the non-dense variants. But is it Zen 5%? Not on server. AMD did deliver the promised 16%, or even it seems 17% average IPC uplift over Zen 4 across Phoronix's wide and varied test suite. It seems likely that the new server I/O die could be the key differentiator, by the way, from the underwhelming desktop Ryzen 9000, as the latter's testing with slower memory showed that DDR5 6000 really helped Zen 5 stretch its legs. Remember, Ryzen 9000 reuses the same I/O die in Zen 4, whereas on server, AMD designed a completely new one, and it seems almost more easy to run higher RAM, higher speed memory on server right now than desktop. Again, calling into question if AMD should have had a new I/O die for Zen 5. SMT yield also appears massive, as remember, SMT is AMD's hyperthreading. With Bergamo, Phoronix saw usually around a 25% improvement in multi-threading workloads when you turned on SMT. Meanwhile, Zen 5 shows at times an almost 50% increase in multi-threading with those same workloads. All that with not slightly lower power compared to SMT off scenario, showing how key SMT is to unlocking Zen 5's potential, while Intel removes it from Arrow Lake. All right, Dan, what did you think about this?
I mean, huge increase in performance, and it really does just seem to me like even if AMD's on their desktop stuff isn't doing as well, I mean, it really just seems like they can scale their CPUs so much better than Intel that it doesn't matter. Like, they can scale up to 128 and 192 cores, get a new I/O die, and now they're just absolutely destroying Granite Rapids weeks after Granite Rapids comes out.
Mm-hmm. For me, I think I brought this up. I don't know if I brought this up with you, but when I see how well Turin does, potentially with the new I/O die being a major factor in that relative to the previous gen AMD had. And again, I think we need more testing. I want to see Zen 5 Threadripper. I don't think it will be a situation where like all of a sudden Threadripper is the best one at gaming again, like we kind of saw with Zen 2 Threadripper, which surprised a lot of people. But I do have to wonder if it won't actually go backwards like we saw with Zen 4 Threadripper versus desktop Zen 4, where it was definitely like a 10% or something worse in gaming. And if that were to happen, you could go, is there room here for a Zen 5 Plus? Like, I can't help but think, like, Should AMD be focusing on some sort of stopgap, especially if Zen 6 doesn't manage to come out late next year? Because, I heard that was the goal. But I've also heard other people say, like happens with half of the things we talk about now, that Zen
Yeah.
6 could slip to 2020. What did that be? 2026 instead of 2025. It does make me wonder, should AMD be preparing a Zen 5 Plus that maybe refines a little bit with another stepping, slightly improved node, or the node is more mature, so you up all clocks a bit more. Maybe with Zen 5 Plus, you just do all Vcache. Like maybe you just do, there's only a 10950 X3D with dual Vcache at the top, then a 10900X, no 9950X, with no Vcache, no point. And then they just go down the stack like that with higher clocks, more Vcache, and then a new I/O die that supports faster memory. And who knows, maybe newer I/O and RDNA 3.5 compute units or something. Like it really does make me wonder if they should do that, because if they did that, refine the software, I don't know. We saw Phoenix to Hawkpoint get a 20% multi-threading jump in some apps just because they refined kind of the silicon slightly with better software. Combining that with a new I/O die, I wonder if they could bring another 10% performance lift, remove the weaknesses, and then just drop that sooner rather than later.
Well, yeah, I mean, what this shows is that AMD clearly left something on the table when it came to Zen 5 desktop. And
Yep. And we saw less issues with Strix as well. There's something with Zen 5 desktop.
yeah, I mean, something with the design team for desktop was misguided clearly. And if they could get that out, a year, like on the to the month after Zen 5 Plus.
Or maybe even like Zen Plus, where I think it was like 11 months later or something.
Yeah, sure. Why not follow it up if they can?
Mm-hmm.
Clearly something went wrong with their design there. So,
and I've even heard behind the scenes, I should follow up with these sources. There are a couple people that told me actually that there are more steppings being tested and manufactured right now. I think for like Epic, and it's like, whoa, what's going on? Why are you launching these other products if new steppings are coming down the line? But maybe just what they're selling now meets what they're advertising, and then they'll say, oh, and then here's the new ones, and it's actually another 10% better, but it's better than what we've been advertising, so we're not screwing anyone over on paper. Like if that's going on, I really advocate for a Zen 5 Plus release, or even maybe just call it Zen 5 2.0 if you don't want to call it Plus. Like I don't think they called Hawkpoint Zen. They didn't call Hawkpoint Zen 4 Plus, yet it felt like a new generational update. Maybe there should be another series.
I mean, depending on how much performance they squeeze out of it, I don't know why you wouldn't just call it Zen 5 Plus. Like even if it's just a new I/O die that allows for faster memory, well, if that gets you, I don't know, 5% better performance, I don't know, it's easily worth it, I would say.
Moving back to the conversation at hand about Turin, Carbon Cry writes in, says Phoronix testing of Turin and Turin Dense reveals that Granite Rapids is less competitive than Emerald Rapids was against Genoa and Bergamo in both performance and efficiency. Will Intel ever catch up in server?
I mean, I think Intel needs to change their design philosophy to not be as big and complex and expensive and heterogeneous as possible, like they've been doing. And I think they need to simplify their designs because simplify their overall design process because it's clearly not working and it's clearly too expensive. So I think they're just getting nowhere with almost every team. So yeah, I mean, I think they're starting to go a different way, so maybe they'll catch up, but I don't think that will be soon.
Yeah, that was something behind the scenes that me and the anonymous Intel engineer discussed that didn't really make it into the show as much. The final Broken Silicon that came out a week ago, but like there's this discussion going on where some people think maybe Granite Rapids is more impressive than Phoronix portrayed it because there was some apps that just did not seem to be working perfectly with Granite Rapids. But I would go at the same time, Phoronix tried to get updates from Intel. Intel said they would happen. They never got them. So why is this Phoronix's fault? Like if AMD did the same, people will be up in arms over removing them from the average. They just decided to keep it. But at the same time, when you point to some apps not running perfectly, as specifically on the dual socket Granite Rapids, at the same time, I'm looking at Granite Rapids really looking most competitive with single socket using faster RAM than AMD that costs way more. And then people I talk to at Intel that defend this are like, well, yeah, but Intel gives you the option of using crazy expensive memory. And it's like, yeah, all right. So Intel needs to use more silicon, more expensive silicon, faster memory to still have dual socket lose to single socket AMD, or it's like it's still bad, and I still see it as wholly uncompetitive. And I just know that I was told behind the scenes Intel wanted Granite Rapids to finally retake performance leadership from AMD. It hasn't, and it just I don't know. Does it feel like Intel's falling further behind over and over again? No, but I'm the closest they seem to almost be Ice Lake versus Zen 3 or Sapphire Rapids versus Genoa or Emerald Rapids certainly versus Bergamo. And when I see this and the things I hear about momentum and server for AMD market share, I don't know. Diamond Rapids needs to be very good, but Turin looks way better in server than I expected it to be. Obviously, I expected it to be good, but this just seems like they're 10-20% ahead of where I thought they would be relative to Intel. And when you see that happen again, I go, I don't know if Intel will ever catch up in server. I really don't know anymore.
Oh, yeah. I mean, at this point, all bets are off the table. Like when they'll catch up or if they'll catch up to them. Like Intel is just in free fall.
Yeah, which I suppose on that cheery note, let us move on here. Oh, dang it. I forgot to switch the lights in the background. Well, you know what? I will make up for that by switching to Intel lights when we were talking about both Intel and AMD. With story number 4, Intel and AMD are unlikely allies in new x86 ecosystem advisory group, quoting here for Tom's Hardware. In a rare public-facing display of cooperation between two of the industry's fiercest rivals, Intel and AMD jointly announced the formation of a new x86 advisory group to ensure a unified x86 instruction set architecture moving forward, an important consideration given both the potential addition of new features and the various x86 simplification efforts already underway. The unprecedented thing here is the public nature of this cooperation. However, AMD and Intel have cooperated for decades. Otherwise, x86 wouldn't work at all. Well, there were some disagreements, notably around SVE, where AMD accepted Intel specification, only for Intel to change that definition while working on Haswell. Broadly, AMD and Intel have cooperated to ensure somewhat unified ecosystem. But with ARM surging in server space, especially with first-party efforts like Amazon's Graviton, and even encroaching on PC with the X Elite, a show of unity is perhaps needed. But ultimately, what will come of this? Well, that is a difficult question. There are really 3 big efforts the two x86 giants are pursuing. First, Intel is defining AVX10 extension to replace AVX 512 already. This is similar to ARM's very powerful SVE vector extension set, but lacks some key features that make SVE interesting. Most of all, it seems AVX 10 will retain the issue of moving code between cores using different sized FPUs, like P&E cores. As for AMD Zen 5 and Zen 5C cores, then there is each company's proposal to simplify x86, mostly by removing legacy features. This is something I heard was a big initiative behind the scenes while they were working on Royal Core, by the way, everybody. Intel proposes a large-scale restructure called x86S. However, some say this might remove too much backwards compatibility at a time when x86 needs that advantage most. And then AMD's effort, though, is more of a series of workarounds and patchovers, but perhaps that is a better approach to maintain compatibility with 30-year-old code. Do you know, this isn't really about performance. It's about ease of validation and security. I'll just throw this in there now. Raku Sakis writes in and says, is Qualcomm the reason behind this collaboration? Yeah, probably mostly. Like they're realizing that if ARM becomes competitive on Windows, then they cannot lose like the unified code working between them.
Especially when you have a competitor or a company like Microsoft, who is pretty much just, I don't know if it's going to go on forever, but just completely throwing their hat in the ring for ARM or Qualcomm specifically, because they view that as increasing competition.
Yeah.
I think that with Microsoft's collaboration with Qualcomm makes this needed for Intel and AMD to, I don't know if I should say remain competitive, because I don't know if Qualcomm can actually take over either of them with all the compatibility issues they have. But keeping x86 alive is obviously important for both AMD and Intel.
Yeah, and I know it's funny. I saw so many thumbnails popping up on YouTube over the weekend and late last week that were just like guys' face going, and then just Intel and AMD work together without saying, in the thumbnail, the much more boring truth of, I mean, they've been working together on keeping compatibility between how they implement x86 for a long time. Now they're just being much more public about it, and probably to send a message that whatever Intel is planning on doing with their new things and AMD, don't worry, we're going to make this the industry standard for high performance as long as we can without breaking backwards compatibility. And also, don't talk about ARM.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much else I have to add to this. Like,
Right.
I mean, I'm glad. Also, they're working on mitigating security issues because I know those are still cropping up from time to time with both
Sure.
Intel and AMD. So that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you're going to bake in mitigations, like at a certain point, you're going to break running code between companies. AI Hollow Knight writes in and says, when ARM on Windows starts working properly, if it does, I would add, would it make sense to have an x86-based CPU with a few ARM cores for only Windows and backgrounds tasks to use? Maybe for LPE cores is my opinion, but for the most part,
Oh, I guess I see
are we
that.
seeing any evidence ARM is more efficient than x86? Like, we continue to have the answer be no. Lunar Lake seems more efficient than Qualcomm's offerings. I've actually seen some data too that the NPU in the Snapdragon X Elite is not remotely as powerful as they say, and it's getting crushed by Strix and especially Intel in actual, not on paper up to performance, but actually running the code. But let's not get into that now. And I just think, you know, when you look at Apple's efficiency wins here in their benchmarks, yeah, they're running their own operating system that doesn't suck. That's why they're winning. Otherwise, Lunar Lake is proving they can be more efficient than ARM. Even if you could argue they have more money to spend on a die to get there, it's like, yeah, but ARM isn't demonstrating to me. Yeah, but Lunar Lake still wins in efficiency. So ARM isn't demonstrating to me that any advantage it has is often realized.
Yeah,
It's usually a tire a little better. And do you really want to get into like the complexity and like having to program in direct threads and maybe if you send something to this LPE core, even if ARM on Windows works well, but what if the one app breaks when it goes into a background task? Like, I don't think so. I'm still not seeing it here.
Yeah, for me, I don't know. ARM doesn't need to like overtake AMD or Intel, obviously, next generation, but they need to make a lot of ground next generation that they put out. Like, they need to prove that they cannot have all of those terrible compatibility issues. And I don't know, like you say, prove that there's actually an efficiency gain, other than this is just a newer generation than what they were comparing it to.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Qualcomm still has a lot to prove with their Elite X series or whatever they're going to call the next one. And if they show big efficiency gains next generation and they show fewer compatibility issues, okay, they'll continue to be interesting, but they need to do both of those.
Yeah, and I think I saw some headline that they had some desktop ARM APU dev kit that was out there that they just canceled because it doesn't work well. So it's like, I'm not seeing the ARM. We should still keep saying if. Do I think over time ARM on Windows will improve? Yeah, I think it will, but it's I think. I don't think it's a foregone
It's
conclusion.
not a guarantee. Yeah.
Because we're seeing a lot of evidence. It's really not going well at all. All right. Moving on then to story number 5. Intel Griffin Cove and Nova Lake IPC leak. Sometimes publishing leaks leads to this channel, Moore's Law is Dead, receiving even more information in response to a video we just put out. And this can include clarifications, disagreements, and confirmation. And this time, we received a treasure trove of information pushing back on the pessimism of this channel's Beast Lake canceled and Beast Lake specs leaks. Because, well, Beast Lake is dead, and the dream of Royal Core, Jim Keller's much hyped up architecture is mostly gone. They are survived by apparently something called Griffin Cove, Intel's future CPU core. So first, to recap before getting into it, months ago, this channel leaked the Royal Core roadmap that planned to eventually lead to an absurd set of IPC increases with Beast Lake and later architectures that would use things called rentable units. These would divide between one mega IPC core into 4 still pretty powerful cores on the fly, depending on what workloads you were using. Then, around a week ago, a live stream was put out by this channel also about Panther Lake, which also was recently shown off by Pat Gelsinger at Lenovo's Tech World event. So we don't have pictures of it, although they're kind of grainy and not high quality, that aim to bring modest IPC improvements and large efficiency improvements to both desktop and laptop next year. But now, with this leak we're talking about now with Griffin Cove, we can confirm more. First of all, Nova Lake, which was supposed to be kind of an early Royal Core implementation, is no longer really Royal Core, but it still sounds pretty good. It's going to use the 18A plus node and is supposed to get an impressive 9 to 18% IPC uplift with Coyote Cove now instead of a different Cove that they canceled. And that means that Panther Lake, if you think about it, if Panther Lake gets at least a 5% IPC uplift or more, maybe that could tie it through Zen 6, and then with Nova Lake getting hopefully 10 or a 15% IPC uplift itself, that might actually beat Zen 6, even though it's launching after it, and it might keep competition going over the next couple of years. And then after Nova Lake will be some architecture, don't know the name of the lake, by the way, although I don't even think that's decided yet, that will use something called Griffin Cove, potentially with a new unified, meaning no more E-cores, which is expected to have another large 10 to 20% IPC uplift and beat Zen 7 in 1 to 2 years after Nova Lake is out. Yep, Griffin Cove is supposed to power Intel's 2027 or later CPUs. And while it is too early to say, it really could be pretty dang good. Or at least the architecture coming after it, which I should clarify, I've been told directly by multiple sources that what comes after Griffin Cove will not use E-cores, will be a unified P-E-core architecture that will almost work kind of similar to what AMD is doing with Zen 5 and Zen 5C. People need to remember the version of Zen 5C in Turin is different than the Zen 5C in Strix Point. I believe the Zen 5C in Turin has better AVX. In Strix, it's worse. So it's really a situation where despite AMD saying there's Zen 5 and Zen 5C, really there's multiple versions of Zen 5, more than 2, and as needed per product, they strip out this feature or add this one. That's what it sounds like Griffin Cove later is going to do in lieu of E-cores. And maybe even do it even more, like strip out even more or add even more, depending on what market it's for, instead of trying to have two entirely different core architectures. Again, though, the only reason I'm not sure if Griffin Cove is the first time to unify is because I have less sources saying they think that will be the first unified ones, and we don't know what the E-cores are. We know Arctic Wolf goes in Nova Lake for E-cores, but the fact that we don't have an E-core for Griffin tells me maybe that is the first one. But yeah, I also was told that Griffin Cove later may implement some of the Royal Core features. Does that include rentable units? Probably not, but it still might implement some of the things Jen Keller was working on. All right, Dan, so what did you think about this? It was actually a pretty big leak, I think.
I mean, yeah, just for the most part, one, if they're moving to just having a variance on the same core design, that sounds to me like they're moving towards a more simplified architecture, or series of architectures, which sounds good to me. It just sounds like Intel R&D budget has gone crazy because they're developing so many different things at once and none of them are bearing that much fruit. So hopefully if they're just simplifying, Intel can become a better competitor again. And then as far as what you've laid out over the next 3 generations, assuming that they can keep energy usage in check, yeah, that all sounds good. I mean, if they get around 10 to 15%, just averaging all that out gen over gen each time, yeah, they'll remain competitive with AMD over time. And if they can put out a good platform that lasts a while, okay, I think you have 2 decent competitors, at least for the next 2 or 3 generations. So, yeah, I mean, that seems promising right now. And assuming Intel can do it without spending too much money like they seem to do, yeah, Intel could be rallying at least to an extent.
And I'm trying to think of really what else I have to say about this, because I guess the only other wrinkle I could add to this that I haven't said, at least in this Broken Silicon, is that there was some degree of pushback on if it was a good decision to cancel Royal Core. This is one of those things where I have to be careful how I talk about that, because this is opinion. This isn't me leaking, oh, it turns out it was good. There are people that think Royal Core was going perfectly well on one side. Some sources like this thing was going great. It would have been revolutionary. We have no doubt we would have done a fantastic job, and that this would have at least gotten us to single core and mixed workload leadership over AMD in a way Sandy Bridge did. We were sure this would have been that good. And over here, there's people that are like, oh, come on. It was having issues. It cost too much money. And Griffin Cove is going to be just as good, if not better overall. And then most of the people are in the middle where they think it would have worked out, but it didn't. And It just would have taken more money, and Pat doesn't think it's worth it because they could use that for AI. So I don't know. I think, as always, in anything with this much emotions and so much riding on these products, again, like, emotions are high, and there's always two sides to a story. But I continue to lean towards mostly on the side that Royal Core would have worked out. But maybe with my opinion, maybe Griffin Cove isn't as bad, and maybe the alternatives aren't going to be as bad as we thought.
Yeah, that might be a good way of putting it. Like, I don't know the internal politics of Intel, obviously, so this is all just speculation, but this sounds like it's a slightly more conservative approach, which maybe is what they need right now. And yeah, like, the idea of Royal Core, if that would have worked out, would have been obviously revolutionized PCs. So, I mean, hopefully they can in someday in the future get back to it or something, but I don't know. It just sounds like that was the bigger swing, and I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if in that company they're scared of being big swings right now.
Yeah. I don't know what else to really say about this. I mean, the only other things that come to mind is it's funny to see that, like, again, we have to remember that, like, when did I leaked Golden Cove late 2019. I think that was my first good big leak that this channel did, where it was finally maturing into not a hobby and more of, let's take the information and how we put it together seriously. Stop being so amateuristic about it. And it panned out. I mean, everything I leaked pretty much was true. But if that was in 2019, and of course the people I spoke to at the time knew about it for about a year, we have to remember, like, when did Pat Gelsinger take over? Wasn't it like 2020 or something? And then Jim Keller was a little before him. I think we have to remember that all this E-Core nonsense started before Pat or Jim Keller were there.
True.
And I think they had to use it and keep using it for a few years at least, because their big cores are so bloated. They need to do something to optimize the die size. But it is funny to see that basically everyone that joined after Alder Lake was almost finalized was like, I don't really like E-Cores. Why are we copying Apple? It works for them. Doesn't mean it needs to work for us. And it's interesting to see every source involved agrees that we got to get rid of E-Cores, and that both Jim Keller, the people working on Royal Core, and Pat and everyone involved is kind of sick of these things. And that the way AMD's decided to do it is a way more efficient design mentality of just, we'll just pull out features and make it the same core smaller. Like, why do we have to, like, have a whole other team doing this? It's ridiculous. But in addition to that, the only thing I would push back onto with some of my Intel sources is, I think people need to remember that what I've leaked about Zen 6 is an at least 10% IPC uplift, and that they had to redo the memory controller from Zen 5, and it's Zen 6 is less of a talk and more as, like, it goes TikTok, right? Less of a talk and more of a, it's, you know, for like a TikTok cadence. Like Zen 4 was a talk of Zen 3, and more of a, we needed to redo a lot of stuff. This is kind of not a new architecture again, but should be thought of as a much more from the grounds up improvement. So if Panther Lake is only on desktop, which I'm told it uses the same, of course, platform as Meteor Lake, which is the same platform, giving Arrow Lake a 9% IPC uplift instead of 15 to 20% that it was supposed to get, I can't help but think that if Panther Lake, you know, gets even a 7% IPC uplift on mobile, that when it comes to desktop, it might be a 4 or 5% with slightly higher clocks, hopefully, and 10 to 20% lower power. If Zen 6 is only 10% better, sure, I think Panther Lake treads water. But if Zen 6 ended up 20% better, and let's remember, Zen 4 turned out better than they expected. I don't know. I still don't quite see it as getting there. And it would be Nova Lake that would be the one where hopefully Intel, after how many years of doing this podcast, has caught up or beat AMD in a sustainable way.
Yeah, it might take that long. I don't know.
And I continue to worry. And I saw a lot of people in the comments of this video say this. 2027 or later, man, is Intel going to have any money by then? Let's hope they do.
We'll see.
And let's hope they haven't wasted all that money on what we're talking about in story number 6. All Jessie wants is for Maurice to play with her more often. But unfortunately, he just does not give out playtime or kisses for as low of a rate as she does. And I think she's just going to have to deal with that. But do you know what you don't have to deal with? Paying too much for Microsoft software if you go to cdkeyoffer.com. This piece of content is sponsored by cdkeyoffer.com and their back to school sale. Whether it's Microsoft operating systems, Office products, or even many of the latest games, cdkeyoffer.com provides PC gamers with a product this community deserves. Amongst endlessly elevating component costs, fair pricing on Microsoft keys is one thing that we at least should get, I think. And you know, the Moore's Law is Dead team has been working with cdkeyoffer.com for a very long time. And that's because they're good to me, good to Dan, good to about a dozen family members of friends of mine that have used their services. And they've been really, really good, most importantly, to the Moore's Law is Dead community. So support this channel by using offer code BrokenSilicon to save 25% off Microsoft software, or you can also use Die Shrink to save 3% off everything else on the website like games. Using either of those codes really helps the channel a ton, and it helps save you money. So use those codes BrokenSilicon and Die Shrink at cdkeyoffer.com today. New Battlemage information gets leaked. Is this Arc Swan Song? Battlemage, the long-anticipated follow-up to Intel's Arc Alchemist series, is nearing some sort of launch, it seems, with Intel India advertising an Intel Basecamp event on October 29th with an Intel client graphics update on the docket. However, this channel's comprehensive leak of Battlemage chips and strategy revealed a step forward over Alchemist, but maybe just a step while the competition takes several next ahead of them. In summary, with even the top G31 die, which Intel had to rework and is below a G10 die that they canceled, by the way, it supposedly will contend with the soon-to-be last-gen RTX 4070, despite offering a 256-bit bus versus the 4070's 192-bit bus, and almost certainly using more silicon to get there as well, therefore more cost. And G21 below G31, despite using a larger 192-bit bus compared to Navi 33, it's supposedly aiming to beat the 7600 XT. And worse yet, resources are now very tight at Intel, forcing Battlemage to be launched on a shoestring budget because Intel already bought all of these TSMC wafers anyways, and they paid for them, so they've got to launch something with Battlemage, even if it's costing them money and not really a cost-effective product. Remember, this launch isn't even happening on laptop, and that leads me, and I think should lead people to believe that, again, this is really only happening because they bought the wafers and they have to put them somewhere. AIBs are unimpressed with BioStar, you know, premium GPU maker BioStar, possibly being one of the few companies preparing Battlemage models. And even more unfortunately, Battlemage is launching next to the value-focused RDNA 4, which, unless AMD fucks it up horribly, should be what Arc fans wanted Arc to be. Cheaper, leaner for the mid and low-end market. Going forward, we will likely see further curtailing of Arc offerings. Our sources even suggested that unless Battlemage is a complete and utter hit, Celestial may only launch one low-end die or no dedicated GPU die at all, consolidating just into tile offerings for APUs, while Intel saves its money for more profitable endeavors. All right, what do you think about this, Dan?
Intel just needs to let its GPU efforts go dormant. I mean, they can't ever compete with the mid-range, or 2 generations in a row now. They've competed barely in the mid-range of the last generation right before the new generation comes out. That's with more silicon. It's not impressive. If they sell it at an incredibly cheap price, maybe it'll be worth getting for some budget people, assuming the driver issues are completely gone, which I think they are for the most part. I guess if they sell it for really cheap, maybe it'll be worth getting. $349.
Yeah,
maybe it'll be worth getting, but that's about it.
I don't think they can afford to sell it for less than like $399, $499, $449 though. I don't see how you can afford to do that. I was told the A770 was sold basically at cost for most of its life. Like at launch, maybe a 5 to 10% profit margin. What was that, like $329 or something? Now you're going from 6 nanometer to 4 nanometer with Battlemage. I think maybe a similar size die or something. And you go, okay, so then this is going to cost, if that was like $300 is break even, I feel like this is going to be like $400, $350, $400. And so if it's $399, look, the 8800 XT is expected to be Navi 31 performance / maybe well, you could still probably call it this 8103, just not maybe top 8103, like 8103 performance. Intel's launching something maybe with cut down 8104 performance. That means the cut down 8800 XT, the 8700 XT could probably be the same price and more performance than this.
Yeah.
Well, again, having, hopefully FSR 4.0 and using less energy, I don't see this.
If the only way they can sell is by selling at cost, then Intel needs to stop developing their DGPUs because it's just obviously not working. Just interesting. I mean, their iGPUs seem to be pretty good right now, but that just does not translate to DGPUs. And I don't know. Don't release Celestial, I don't think, unless you can really work past the design issues that they clearly have.
I think one thing we could maybe hope for is what if, because I've heard Celestial may even scale to multi-die. What if Celestial has 4 128-bit dies, and then if it can scale up to 512-bit DGPU? If that doesn't pan out, or it's just not worth the money to launch it, what if you could use one of those as a tile on an APU? 128-bit memory controller. Like, that is the way forward for Intel, I think, is make a 128-bit die, maybe 192-bit. You could even disable some of that when you put it in an APU. And that allows you to make one tile, that's like 150 millimeter squared that fits on Nova Lake, laptop. And then you take that and give it 12 gigabytes, or I guess by then, hopefully, you would say 24 gigabytes over 192-bit. And then you only have to develop one thing, and that allows you to scale the architecture ahead of how strong it would be on laptops, so you don't hit the scaling wall we saw with Broadwell. That's what I think they need to do moving forward, because I think they cannot afford to make anything else. I especially think about G21 here for my point. Like, even if it's like, it's using 4 nanometer, and I've heard that Navi 44, the smaller RDNA 4 die, is very small and will be somewhere around a 6700 XT to 7700 XT. If Intel is like 10% weaker than that, where do you price it? AMD's selling 6 nanometer cards with the same performance right now for $300. Like, where do you price this? Like, 250? It's not making a profit. So I don't know. That's what I think. It's that way they could just take the worst yields from laptop, put GDDR7 on it, push it out as a $300 GPU to keep the dream going until they have the money to scale. Anything besides that, though, no one's buying a high-end Intel card.
No.
It doesn't matter how good it is. Alchemist has horrible market recognition and brand recognition. Unfortunately, I just don't think anyone would buy it.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe we can pray that the multi-tile design actually works out well so they could compete in the mid or high end in a couple generations. So, yeah, if they can just focus on developing one tile that actually works well, good. Keep doing that.
Mm-hmm. But otherwise, I don't have much else to say. I've been told pretty directly these things should launch in a few months. It's Intel. Who knows if a launch is really a launch?
Yeah.
I would expect them probably to show these off on October 29th and launch them end of November or something. And I don't know. I guess we'll see. I guess the only other thing I will add is I did hear the performance and drivers should be much more consistent and better than last time. But to see it to believe it. But it'd be just so sad if this comes out and it's actually okay, but no one cares. But I think that's kind of what we're expecting.
Yeah, if it releases at the right price with good driver support, yeah, sure, it's not a bad card. It's just doesn't speak well to Intel, no matter what, really.
All right. Let us now move on to story number 7, which we can finally change the color to a different shade than a red or blue. Moore's Law Z leaks Blackwell delays in pricing. After an optimistic Griffin Lake leak and an indifferent Battlemage leak, we end with a disappointing Blackwell pricing leak. Recently, Nvidia started briefing AIBs on expected MSRPs for upcoming Blackwell GPUs, and even AIBs are not happy with this. We have pretty wide price ranges, however, but they do not paint a nice picture either way for gamers. First of all, the RTX 5090 is expected to push performance up a lot over the RTX 4000 series, but it may push up prices even more, with a range of $1,999 or $2,000 to up to $2,500 for the 5090. That's a 25 to 56% higher increase in price, which means pretty much in line with the higher performance overall, unless they are generous and make it $2,000. Meanwhile, the RTX 5080 is expected to be around or just below the 4090 performance, while being sold for between $1,200 to $1,500. And last, the 5070 at least should be sold for a similar price to what the 4070 was. But, Nvidia, even if they sell it for $600, don't celebrate yet. They're saying it's going to be around a 4070 Ti with better RT, meaning, yes, it might be the same price as the 4070 at launch, but right now we already have the 4070 Super. This thing might only be 15-20% better for the same price, and almost stagnation in price performance. So there you go. Oh, and supposedly an AIB model of the 5090 was pictured, I think, today as of we're recording. Yay. So what did you think about this, Dan?
I mean, pretty disappointing top to bottom. Like, I think it's kind of ridiculous that the 5070 is still only going to have 12 gigabytes of RAM. But I guess that's just what NVIDIA does. If the 5080 is $1,500, I mean, great. They're not moving the needle on price performance at all with anything at that point. And they're barely moving it at all with the 5070. And I don't know, with whatever the 8800 XT will be priced at, I just pray that the 5070 isn't competitive if they try to go for like $700. Or
Yeah.
I should say, I pray that like people actually go for the AMD one instead of, I don't know, people seemingly always flocking to NVIDIA online.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is, I'm sorry, one thing I have to say, and I say this openly in the video, is I am well aware that NVIDIA's plans have changed multiple times this year. I'm also well aware that NVIDIA's well aware that AIBs would have leaked this. They always do. And so I do think that a lot of this is NVIDIA gauging how we react. And of course, everyone says they don't like it. And so they might be doing this so that when they launch the 5070 for $600 or something, everyone goes, oh, it's not $700, yay. Or the 5080 for $1,200 and it has 4090 performance. Everyone goes, wow, that's actually a 30% increase in price performance. But I don't know. I could see it going either way. I could totally see NVIDIA selling it for like $700 and $1,300 and then launching 18 and 24 gigabyte models of the 70 and 80 for, $800 and $1,500, and you can already see the NVIDIA marketing. What do you mean? It's got the same performance as the 4090 with less power consumption, better ray tracing. It's even $100 cheaper with the same amount of RAM. We're being so generous to you guys. So I could see that happening. And again, just to be clear, I have heard there's probably an 18 gigabyte version of the 5070 coming.
Oh, that makes sense, I suppose.
But obviously not at launch.
Maybe we'll even be blessed and it's a little overclocked and they can call it the 5070 Super.
Or 5070 Ti. I think that's possible too, because if they use 18 gigabytes, the RAM might be decently faster. So they might just call it. And then when I say this, I've said this before, if they do that, come on, guys. Like, they're going to charge $800. They're going to say 18 gigabytes instead of 16 with a 4070 Ti Super, lower power, higher performance by 2%. What do you mean? Why wouldn't we charge the same price?
Yeah, that's just their strategy at this point.
But I don't know if you had any other thoughts on this, Dan.
No, not really. Just disappointing.
Yeah. All right. AI Fish AI Wrangler writes in, wow, so many AIs, people. Again, for those not keeping track, so many people in the Moore's Law Stood Patreon now are choosing to find ways to shove AI into their name so that AI is everywhere.
And I mean, he didn't even, never mind, I won't give him more ideas. But
yeah, I was going to say, I can see. He's going to guess what we're talking about, where he could put another one. Looking at leaked specs for the 5080, can you remember a generation ever where the 80 class is less than half of the top die? I could totally see NVIDIA trying 12 to 1300 for the 5080. It looks to me like they didn't learn anything from the 4080 12 gigabyte, 4070 Ti, or the underwhelming 4080 sales. Well, sales for some of this stuff picked up, and they don't see themselves as having competition. So I, first of all, could just see NVIDIA going, oh, Lovelace isn't selling as well. AMD might take 5%, 10% market share, go from 20 to 30%. Whatever, we'll use the capacity for AI. And then we'll just come back harder with a follow-up gen if we need to.
Yeah, and that's just a big part of their whole strategy is AI is really what matters for them. So, I mean, the rest of this shit, that's where they're making all their money.
Yeah. So I could actually just, like when you said they haven't learned their lesson, maybe they have learned their lesson. Their lesson is that AMD, even when it's a stupidly better deal, like it has been with the XTX versus the 4080, still barely or doesn't take market share. So, oh well, what if RDNA 4, they're actually as aggressive as they need to be? We calculate that we won't lose more than 10% market share. One gen, we're not even talking about all the cards people have already bought from the other gens. And then we'll take that and make more money in AI. But for the actual question at hand of, when has this happened where an 80 is less than half the die size of the 90? Easy. Titan. The RTX, the GTX 680, I believe, was 295 millimeters squared. And the Titan, I think, was 500 something. So it wasn't it was like 90% bigger. But I think that's close enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what happened? Everyone was fawning over the 680 for losing to the 7970 while giving you less RAM for the same price. So again, I agree. What Nvidia does is not, pro-consumer, but to everyone who complains, where the fuck were you a decade ago when this could have actually made a difference?
Oh yeah, it's been the same story for a decade, and people finally figured it out.
The pot has been boiled slowly by increasing the temperature, but the temperature has been increasing the whole time. You just notice now, frogs. Gentech writes in and says, how cheap do older nodes become over time? If someone made a new GPU architecture on, say, 14 nanometer, what would a GPU, what would the size of a GPU of 8102 cost? Well, we already know. I mean, there was the 2080 Ti and the Titan RTX at a 745 millimeter square die. And that will be a bigger die size than Lovelace, but a smaller one, I think, than Blackwell. And they were able to sell a cut down version of it for $1,200, with the 2080 Ti. So, I mean, how much less did that node cost? I mean, I believe compared to 4 nanometer, probably half the cost. And I don't know, guys. Blackwell's over double the performance, so far exceeding double.
Well, because the same size, it's going to be substantially cheaper. So if you wanted to make, say, 8102 on 14 nanometer, well, I don't think you could.
First of all, yes, you could not. But even if you could, it's probably going to cost more to make anyways. The smaller dies and the newer nodes too, just in general, have better yields, saving you money in what you can bin to sell for more. And then on top of that, they use less energy. So, like, for example, let's actually use a good one, like 8103. What's that, like a 390 something millimeter square die? Same die size as the 3070. A little smaller die size, I believe, than the 2070 had. I mean, so then you'd have an 800 millimeter square die that would probably actually use 500 watts. And then they would have to sell it for at least $1,200-$1,300, which is what they sold the 2080 Ti for, which is a lot weaker. So no, it doesn't. That might change with 2 nanometer, where they're like the costs are getting insane. And I think it has changed a little bit. There's a reason Sony is probably just going to use 6 nanometer for the PS5 Slim for the rest of its life without die shrinking it. But going back further than that, no, it wouldn't be worth it cost wise. Quick Jumper writes in, hi, Tom. This is an interesting comparison. Oh, he's got a link there. As it shows AMD's R&D growing steadily, but NVIDIA is just growing faster. That's why AMD's lagging behind in some ways. They have to be really smart in what they invest their money into. So what do you think about the R&D comparison? Do you agree with the article that NVIDIA seems to be in a better position than AMD in the AI market?
Well,
obviously. Fucking duh. They're the most valuable company, at least on paper, in history and period. Right now, I think they've fallen a bit since they hit number one there. But yeah, I mean, look, there's no way around it. They're in a better position than AMD is. The question on investing in AMD versus NVIDIA isn't, is NVIDIA in a better position? Is whatever percentage of the market of AI NVIDIA has right now, let's say it's 90%. Are we going to bet that NVIDIA gets to 95 and then my stock will be worth 10% more in a few years? Or are we going to bet that AMD gets to 30% and they're going to triple in value?
Or hell,
probably that a lot of people would still buy AMD making that bet.
Or hell, even 15 or 20%, like that would could still represent massive growth for AMD.
Exactly. And so, yeah, look, Nvidia is in a better position. I would hope nobody argues against that. But AMD is probably not in as bad of a position as some people might suggest. And that's why you would still bet that AMD could continue competition there and maybe be worth investing in more. But again, I don't own stocks in either of these companies. So,
Yeah, and at a certain point, the market is going to stop growing, or it's going to slow, you would think. And listen, if you bought in on Nvidia stock in like 2015 or something, Jesus Christ, good for you. But
Sell.
it is going to sell.
I would advise to sell.
It is going to slow down eventually.
You know, as someone who wishes they would have done the same. Yeah, I mean, I think you sell because I don't think, especially if you like what are they worth like now? Like 1,000 times more. Like if you bought even $1,000 worth and that becomes $1 million, I don't think you're gonna. It might even be more. I think it's insane. I don't think you're gonna sell that and be a millionaire and go, I could have been a double millionaire. No, I don't think so. I think you're gonna be happy you sold if you were someone who bought that low. So, you know, then should you reinvest some in AMD? I don't know. I would just recommend index funds because no one over time usually beats just index funds. But you know, that'd be the argument for why you might do one versus the other. All right. Now let us move on then to finally the last story in this mini storied episode. Story number 8, AMD 7650 GRE Extra confirmed from Benchlife via video cards. The recently revealed Radeon RX 7650 GRE is expected to use a Navi 33 series GPU, it seems. However, it's still unclear whether it will be Navi 33 XT from the 7600 XT, 33 XL from the Radeon RX 7600, but the naming of the 7650 GRE is essentially now confirmed and was already confirmed when this channel leaked the official logo, by the way, people. So there you go. The 7650 GRE is an odd product with an odder name, but it's real, I guess. And that is about as much as we know or care to talk about it. Although you guys submitted a bunch of questions we're about to get to. A low-end derivative of Navi 33 is what it is. Maybe faster memory, maybe higher clocks yet still, but still in the neighborhood of a 7600 XT card, already available and well priced. Yeah, I remember initially, Dan, me and you thought it would have to be Navi 32 because they already have 2 binions.
Yep.
Or 3, if you can include the mobile ones of Navi 33 with all compute units enabled. What the hell are they doing? But you know what I bet it is? Even better binions or the same as the 7600 XT, or maybe like 1% better, but 8 gigabytes of RAM because China doesn't pay as much for memory because all of their games, for the most part, have lower VRAM requirements than AAA Western games.
So maybe just like slightly overclocked, less RAM?
That's my guess. A 7600 XT, slightly overclocked with less RAM, or who the fuck knows? Maybe lower clock somehow, and yet they call it 7650. You know, there's the 6750 GRE, 10 gigabyte.
Yeah, either way, I doubt there's really going to be much of a reason to buy it in the West or outside of China if it ever becomes available outside of China, which probably will.
Probably in some way. Endless Logins writes in, how can there be a 7650 GRE, which stands for Golden Rabbit Edition, when it's already the year of the dragon? If they are pandering to the Chinese market, let's not do that. They should just call it the BMW, the Black Myth Wukong Edition. Also, they might like BMWs there, so you could do that. Or do they actually? Let me see. Are one of the best-selling luxury brands. I just had a guess, you know, because they tend to like brands that are luxury in other countries, but not top tier, and then they make it top tier in China. Yeah, I agree. It should just be the BMW edition. Why not?
Or the wooden dragon edition. We can call it that.
But yeah, I just don't get it. By the time this launches, we'll be almost to the year after the dragon as well, which I believe is a snake. So no, it makes absolutely no sense to me. Anytime I ask experts and veterans that I talk to for leaks, they're like, you don't get it. They've made a foothold in the Chinese market, so it makes sense. And I'm like, okay. If you assume they're stupid, I mean, it's like, it just comes off to me like, well, they can't possibly understand that there's another year. So let's just do this. Like the Japanese market was like Demon Souls would never sell well in America because they like easy games, or Strongbow adds sugar to their drinks because Americans are fat and stupid. It's like, I somehow think the Chinese people are smart enough to understand Snake Edition, but whatever. Cole Addict writes in and says, AMD should have named the 7650 GRE the 7654 GRE because they won't get a chance to do that with sequentially lowering numbers into probably 2 years.
That's a good point.
I think it would make more sense. I don't think it would make any less sense than what they're doing. Florida Man writes in, is there any indication of RX 8000 GPUs using a 12V to 2 times 6 pin connector? It's like a 16 pin. I know there were a handful of 7000 series cards that did make use of it. I actually asked a sword about a source, not a sword.
A sword?
I asked a legendary living sword about this. And I was told that maybe some RDNA 4 will, but for the most part, it's unnecessary. Like, if most of the lineup's going to use less than 250 watts, there's really no need. Just use 2 8-pins and then a single 8-pin for RDNA 4. And with RDNA 5, I'm told they've thought about it, but no decision's been made. Oh. So any of your RDNA 5 may be good. Uh-oh.
What?
Hashtag wait for RDNA 5.
Wait the 2 years.
No, but like that's a meme at this point where people make fun of us. Like, we're always supposed to wait for the next thing and then it sucks. But I'm well aware that recent launches haven't panned out, people. I'm starting to hear good things about RDNA 5, though. Feel free to type in all caps that I'm terrible for saying that if you want to. Techno writes in, have you heard any update on Chippy? He loves to he got a weird autocorrect. Oh, in British, they changed chiplet to Chippy in British autocorrect.
Stupid
RDNA 5, is the progress on that still coming along? Yes. And I think it kind of sounds like RDNA 5 is going to scale to high end again. So there you people go.
Well, they better do it then, Tom.
Because we will certainly have a clip. You're wrong again. And now let us move on here to the wrap up. A smaller one than usual, but one that we will need to get to nonetheless. MI 325X launches. Don't know that I have much to say about the 325X. I think we've already talked about it. 256 gigabytes of RAM is what would make it truly distinguish itself as being a far cheaper, hyper high capacity memory AI card versus what Nvidia will try to sell you for a way higher price. Samsung has unveiled 40 gigabit per second memory. Which is pretty crazy, actually. I mean, we're talking about 20 gigabit per second being on RDNA 4 and was on RDNA 3. So yeah, that could mean a 128-bit card would have the same bandwidth as a 256-bit card. And certainly, if there was a 5090 Ti or a Titan that got 40 gigabit per second memory over 512-bit bus.
Ooh, that would be fast.
Yes, that would have a lot of bandwidth, but it's coming, people. This one, Dan, you added. Apparently, Windows 11 24H2 is now causing blue screens of death.
Unless Western Digital SSDs.
Specifically on Western Digital?
Yep.
I guess so. It's kind of a PSA announcement. If you have a Western Digital SSD and you're using Windows 11, you should pay attention to what's in the description here.
Yeah, and there is a mitigation. You could just have to alter your registry, a registry file. So I don't know, read the show notes if you have a Western Digital NVMe drive, if you're upgrading to Windows 11, because you might need to do something to make it not BSOD.
So,
Gotta love it.
I can't imagine why anyone would want a game on console. And then moving on to a last minute one that I added, Dan. There's more and more PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, or PSSR for short, testing going on, and it does seem to be clearly better than FSR 3.1 from what I'm seeing here. Well, it seems good. Like it. I mean, especially if you have ray tracing on, DLSS 3.7 is better, but it seems clearly better than FSR 3.1 and debatably on the same tier as DLSS in some games. So and not just DLSS, recent DLSS. So especially if they continue to innovate on this is a pretty big deal here. It really is. And I think it's also a sneak peek into what we could see out of FSR 4 next year, where AMD is now right there with DLSS. Of course, this is before DLSS probably adds sandwich making mode or something to it. I don't know, but
yeah, I mean, assuming this is in some degree like a preview for FSR 4, or if
what they could achieve.
Yeah, if some of it makes it into FSR 4.
Mm-hmm. There you go. It's encouraging. That's why Sony did this, because they don't want to be reliant on AMD and they want to have something that just works at least on the same ballpark as DLSS. So they're not beholden to if AMD is fucking up or not that year, if I may put it that way. All right. And then we have a couple of final reader mails here. Oliver1350 writes in and says, hello, Tom. I'm wondering if you have heard any buzz on the next... we get this question every time. Next generation premium handhelds, the Steam Deck 2. Are these devices wait for another generation of improvements? or are they closer to 18 to 24 months away? I don't even know if this exact question has been asked before. I feel like every podcast we get asked about the Steam Deck too. He's asking, when's it coming out? What are the performance targets? I did ask one source about it. The person, how do I put this? It's not something, it still doesn't seem to be known. It still seems to me like it probably isn't launching next year. That's my suspicion. And if it is, it's certainly near the end of the year. Again, when it comes to performance targets, I don't have anything specific about it. But what I do know is I think it wouldn't really make sense to launch unless they were comfortable. It could kind of run PS6 games and at a minimum run games in a way that they can't now. And I think that would mean you're going to want a great Gen 4 or Gen 5 SSD of some sort. You're going to want 8 cores at least on a modern CPU architecture, or maybe 6, but I think 8. And you're going to want in graphics performance. Like, what did they do before? Basically 720p 40. Yeah. Kind of, maybe sometimes 60, maybe even. Because I think the resolution on the Switch is not the Switch, the Steam Deck. But people get mad when I accidentally say Steam Deck instead of Switch, or the other way around, by the way. So let me correct myself. I think the resolution on the Steam Deck is higher than 720p. So you could say 720p 60, maybe 900p 30, 1080p 30-ish. Like, I think you're going to want to have it, just my opinion, be something where it's like firm 1080p 60 with good visuals, maybe even 1440p, which I think you can achieve now pretty much with Strix. So I think one more gen at least worth, and then some special version of it is probably what they would want to get to a place where it's like, it's not grainy, it's not blah, blah, blah. It's like, you can turn on ray tracing, 1080p 60. Low levels, you'll have to use FSR4. But don't you think, Dan, like, for it to feel like a generation better, it can't just be like 1080p 30, or it's like it needs to be 1080p 60 ultra, 1440p 40, like firmly feeling like next gen on the go.
With the Steam Deck, or I should just say with Valve, I think they are going to want to go for an actual like generational uplift for their handhelds, because
that 4 to 8x in performance we see in consoles.
I feel like that's just the way Valve operates with companies like who all makes the other ones, like Asus, MSI. Yeah, I could see those being every new generation they make a new one, or every other generation they make a new one. So I don't know, maybe you'll probably, I wouldn't be surprised at least if you see new MSI and Asus crap like next year or something.
And Compressed AI Blocks writes in, Tom Ford and Dan Ford, read in British. Tom Ford and Dan Ford, how do you guys feel about the Horizon Zero Dawn remaster? Bit much in it, mate. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know why there's the remaster of the remaster. I've already seen memes, Horizon Zero Dawn remaster for PS6. It's just something Sony does, and they're going to keep doing it as long as people buy them.
Yeah, I don't have many thoughts on it. Bit silly.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is it seems, and maybe I read this wrong, it kind of to me seems like they're just kind of replacing the old version on PSN, depending on what platform you're on, then adding $5 to the cost. And by $5, I don't mean like 75. I mean, like, now they're going to sell it for like 10, 20. I don't know. Now it's 40 instead of 30. But on PS5, you get the better visuals. Like I don't really care. As long as that's all they're doing. But, I get it.
I guess they're doing some overhauls, like there are more NPCs and stuff. And so the world feels more alive than it did originally, which is something, I guess. Not a huge deal, but
I think the mentality Sony has is obviously, number one, we can make more money off of a game we already made. But, number two, if we just include all the DLC or something, if we add more NPCs, better effects, take half a year to have Nixxes, one team at Nixxes, make it feel PS5 level. I don't know. It's like, then anyone who hasn't played the game yet, like let's say someone hasn't paid GTA 5 yet, because I'm starting to get back into it somehow, or for some reason right now. They never got it. They see it on sale on PS5 for like $20, or they can get the PS4 version for $10. I think most people will get the PS5 version. Yeah. And it allows them to play it at higher resolutions and frame rates with better features, so it feels like you're playing the most recent version. I know a lot of people would go on PC, well, you can't, that's not how that works. And it's like, yeah, but on PC, you turn up settings you had before that you couldn't do. They are actually overhauling the engine a little bit and adding more to the missions and stuff. And so if all that means is they try, because that's really what they're doing, instead of having Horizon Zero Dawn go from a $60 PS4 game to a $40 PS4 game to a $30 to a $20, and they sell that forever with those settings. And what they do now is they just go to PS5 and they're like, now we can keep selling it for $40 and it feels more like a PS5 game. And then they update it again. Now we're going to keep selling it for $40 and it feels more like a PS6 game. I get it. And it seems like most of the time the market will pay that extra $10 to make it have more modern features. And that's what they're doing. I think half of the time it looks really silly, though, like which games they're choosing to do it for. Where is Bloodborne? But
nope.
I don't know. That's why they're doing it. I don't have much to say.
Random frame rate drops are essential to the experience of Bloodborne, Tom.
I mean, they are much more cinematic. Didn't we read that the PS5 Pro will boost some PS4 games to higher resolutions and frame rates? Is there any chance that will work with Bloodborne? My guess is kind of no, but
they will specifically exclude Bloodborne from that feature.
Yeah. I would imagine at a minimum in backwards compatibility mode, it runs at a locked 30 now. The question would be is if they could apply some forced higher resolution, and at least now it's a stable 30 instead of a shaky in the 20s thing. But I don't know. We'll see. I'll actually be looking for that on the PS5 Pro. That probably because I think I managed to get a deal where I got it with gift cards, so I am probably getting the PS5 Pro, everybody. But the first thing I do is might check if Bloodborne runs any better or how much better. It might be the first thing I do.
Crossing my fingers.
I'm not holding up my hopes for that one. But I think on that goofy note, that is the end of this episode of Broken Silicon. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. As always, please make sure you're subscribed to the Moore's Law Z YouTube channel and ring the bell button. Share this content, comment below for the algorithm, and support us on Patreon. A new Die Shrink just came out. It's ad-free. It's like 45 minutes going through things with Arrow Lake and other subjects. It's only the $2 tier is required to get it. The bottom tier also gets you access to the Discord, and you can ask guest questions. Tech Guest City is coming on soon. X Gamer should be coming on soon. A lot more big guests are actually being lined up for the rest of the year and early next year. So, yeah. You get those early ad free. You support us on Patreon as well. You can ask us questions. But I'm starting to ramble. I've got a concert to get to. Dan, any final words?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Well, have a great rest of your week, everybody.
Goodbye.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, it's not just me. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders being done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance is also provided by Carmen Cry and Carrie Nosugata as well. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com on the About/support page. In the event you do want to hire me for consulting work, hire Gerard for audio work, hire Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or you're interested in working with Carbon Cry or Carrie Nosugata as well. You can also find our long-term sponsors on that page if you want to show them some love for putting food on our tables. Or you can also mail us some love. You can send letters or hardware donations to the following address: Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. Although, to be honest, the best way to show Moore's Law is Dead some love is to support us on Patreon. Patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content truly possible. Every month, and really every day, depending on who you're talking about, me, Gerard, Dan, and Jean-Philippe are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of content that we could not keep doing unless we knew the work was possible without being reliant on sponsors dictating every little thing we put out. Don't get us wrong. We love our sponsors, but we love directly working for you, our fans, much more. If you have any extra money, even a couple free dollars a month, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. Those couple of monthly dollars will get you access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to ask guest questions, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who I am sure would love to meet you. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to early, ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask questions in all Broken Silicon episodes and Loose Ends live streams ahead of the recording, and the entire back catalog of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, in addition to having thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts depending on the tier, with other perks available as well. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us directly every month, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family, and on social media and websites like Reddit. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app of choice. All of this does really help us so much. But like I said, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher supported levels: Brad Medlin, Drita Foles, Z Chits, Daniel D, Aaron Close, Deke, Nicholas Buckner, Jan Rauno, Daniel Hyde, GZ Ziggy, MJB1, SNES Chalmers, Jim Ferriero, Valcom Aleb, Jensen Wang, Toka, Gregory S. Acker, Sarcastro, Chris Drick, Compressed AI Block, 3DS Boy 08, Hal Puma, Shredbird, Holden Mobley, Samuel Molas, Jordan Simkovic, Julian Leak, The Boz Haas, Jonathan, Franco Frederic, Chrysantine, Jake Dude 23, Jake Martin, Zlicky, Meat and Pork, Nithra Zink, Tim Robb, Ian Clifford, Travis Gooding, Mats, Suit Taylor, Stephen Coates, Greg, Michael McGee, Patty Cakes, Gamers Unite, Amiable Chief, Mark Mitchell, Tommy, Mark Raidmaker, James Anderson, Cole Addict, Jamie Witters, Cameron, Henry Zhang, Wesley Sager, Michelle Bell, Hexapuma, Reginald Ari, Teak Autumn, Mai Sharona, Jeff Sedler, Winstar, Corey Leonard, James I. Raider, Winwang, Little Germany, JSMMH, Shay, Milton, Melodic Warrior, Brett Jones, Chuck Glidden, Mac Daffy, Stephen Dick, Dave Schultz, Austin Haggerty, Justin Bustle, Joe Foot, Brian Scanlon, Hardland, Jason Angima, Joseph Kelly, Slushba, Himsa Gung Tales, 2299, Neil Valverga, Sisyphos 7771, The Forbidden Juice, RB Racer, Brian Wright, AC, Alex Vega, Dr. J Mad, Free D, Michael Cozy, John Swin, Crystal Joe, Elber Gun, Kikum, Solarized 80, Thalo 215, Jeffrey Gentleman, Matthew Marlowe, Brian P, Hoodat 42, Sprutnik, F. Figef, Higuk, Cornster 671, Penta Winter, Hal Richard, Angel of Cake, Omega Doge, Mr. Tiger, John Wick Boomstick, Porcelain Oats, Curry King 3, Nick, Mania, Sakosha, Armand Baktura, State Farm Snake, Ryle Chi Bulls, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.